The gentleman I am going to introduce tonight, in my opinion, and I have interviewed hundreds of people on this subject, and this to me is the #1 researcher, not in Canada, not in North America, but the world, when it comes to UFOs and disclosure. And if you've heard Grant Cameron speak before, but never live, you were in for a very, very good treat. Grant is educated from the University of Manitoba, I believe. He is an award-winning author. His work at BeyondPresidentialUFOs.com is sought out by not only amateur researchers such as myself, maybe some of you. It is also very well looked at by many people who are involved in governments around the world and want to know what the heck is going on in this UFO world. Whether you believe in the conspiracy or not, there is something strange going on. And Grant, along with a number of other people, were working hard, like Lorian Fenton, who you saw last night, many other people, Nick Pope, Richard Dolan, Victor Vigiani, just to name a few, are out there trying to bring this story, the second most important story in mankind's history, to the public. Because the media is not covering it, they'll hit it in just a little bit. The public is rarely discussing it, and the politicians do not acknowledge that it's even going on. So with that, please give a warm round of applause for our keynote speaker to the first annual Caribou Paracon, Mr. Grant Cameron.
Thank you, buddy. Turn off my cell phone. It was very nice. It's a bit like being at my funeral. Everybody's saying nice things about me that may not be true. I've got 3 different subjects that I'm going to sort of touch on. 2 are disclosure related, but I wanted to do sort of a poll because we're not strictly UFO here. So I have a section on government disclosure. So how many people want to see government disclosure? Oh, everybody. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Alien disclosure, what the intelligence behind the phenomena is actually doing. I have a new theory about that. And the third is music, the bizarre connection between music and UFOs. Wow, that means I got to do everything. Okay. So let me start. And I have a radio show called The Cameron Files. I didn't want my name on it, but it wasn't going to work with anything else on KGRA. And at the beginning of every show, I say what I'm saying right now is fasten your seatbelts. We're about to go very, very fast. Anybody who's seen me lecture knows that as I get tight on time, I can talk very, very fast. So we're going to do UFOs, weird stuff, and the theory of wow. This is my new theory that I've come up with. Last December, people are familiar with the New York Times story with the AATIP program. The American government sort of confirms to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, and to Politico. All 3 newspapers go exactly the same day. And this is not coincidence. When you have 3 major newspapers in the United States who all run a story that says the U.S. government has just admitted they've studied UFOs since 2007, and they all do the story the same morning, and it's a story that takes them 2 months to put together, this is not coincidence. This is the government setting this up. So I've written a book called Managing Magic. I'm going to do a second one dealing with this Tom DeLonge operation. This is this famous rock star who's gotten involved in the field, and what I will maintain is that the U.S. government has been leaking material into the UFO community since 1947. The first thing they did was give 2 UFO photographs, 8 by 11, it looked like gun camera footage, to Kenneth Arnold, who had the first dramatic sighting in June of 1947, gave her 2 UFO photographs from the 4th Air Force and tried to convince Kenneth Arnold that these were for real. So they were leaking stuff right from the word go. What they want to do is they want to manage the story. And so and this is the thing with whether it's the government cover-up or whether it's the intelligence behind the phenomena, both are doing the same thing, I maintain. If the intelligence wanted you to know what's going on, they would land on the White House lawn and they would tell you, we're here for whatever reason, whatever they're here for. They're not doing that. And so they're not disclosing, but they're not covering up. And that's what I will describe to you today. They're not covering up. They're doing something in between. The same as the U.S. government. If they wanted to disclose, they'd stand the president up and they'd tell you what's going on. So they're not disclosing, but they are not covering up because there's massive numbers of leaks. And I'm going to show you some of the latest documents that have been leaked into the UFO community, and I'll show you how they do this. And what they're doing is a controlled, slow leak. They're not covering up, they're not disclosing, they're doing something in between. So that's what they do in this first December article that came out in New York Times, Washington Post, Political. So they're referring to the advanced, in the New York Times it's called the Advanced Theoretical, Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. But the Washington Post is told that it's Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. The Politico magazine is told it's Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. And all those newspapers have high-level sources inside the Pentagon. They would not run with the story unless they had gone into the Pentagon and talked to their sources and said, is this for real? And the sources inside the Pentagon would say, yeah, this is for real. So they put all this material, they run with the story, but there's two different names. And the reason they do this, in my opinion, is that you read the one and you say, oh, it's advanced aviation. And then you say, oh, it's advanced aerospace. And the two groups start to fight. And nobody can confirm it. So you have these two groups fighting. So what they are doing, in short, is they alter the material. They change a little bit here, change a little bit here, and release it. Therefore, what they're putting out is not real. So when the document comes out, they say, it's a phony document. We didn't release it. They did release it. They just made some changes so that they could say it was a phony document. If they wanted to release a real document, that's disclosure, and it all falls apart, and the whole story comes out. So this is what they're doing. They're doing this gradual sort of disclosure. So they have this article comes out. Now this is the latest version, and I'm going to do mostly alien disclosure tonight. But this is a website from a guy by the name of Chris Mellon. If you're familiar with To the Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge, they have 4 board members. One of them's name is Chris Mellon. Chris Mellon has these documents on his website, beginning of August of this year. And he puts them up there, and people grab them off the website, and then he takes it down, and he cuts his website. He locks his website so you can't get on. So here's what they call a back thing, where you can go back on somebody's website, but the documents aren't there, but it actually shows that the documents are on his website. So the question is, why would Chris Mellon, who claims not to be working for the government, have these documents on his website? And one of the ones that he released, and I pushed to get these documents, they still won't release. There's about 40 pages of documents that are floating around now. And this is a resignation letter from Lou Elizondo. Lou Elizondo claimed that he was the guy that was running the AATIP program, the UFO program for the military, and they were looking at all sorts of recovered hardware, videos, interactions with U.S. military operations. So this is there was all this dispute. Okay, so where's his resignation letter? If he resigned from the government, and he said, I resigned from the government because they weren't taking UFO seriously, and therefore I quit, and I joined the Tom DeLonge operation because he wants to get the information out. So everybody said, well, where's your resignation letter? And then there was all these games. Well, you know, it's classified. No, it's not classified. You can release the guy's resignation letter. There's no reason why you can't release the guy's resignation letter. So one of the documents that was on this Chris Mellon's website, and he used to be an advisor to an intelligence advisor to the Senate Intelligence Committee, to the Pentagon, and this is the guy where these documents appeared on his website, and then suddenly the document all disappeared. People pulled the documents. This is the resignation letter. And I knew as soon as I saw it, I said, I want to see the resignation letter. So I see the resignation letter, and of course, it's got a problem. There's no date on it. So you're writing a letter to the Undersecretary of Defense, or the Secretary of Defense, resigning, and you don't put a date on it. So all you have to do is go to Google, you look on Google, and you just put in Secretary of Defense memo, and they all have dates on them. And you can go through them all, and everyone has a date, but his doesn't have a date. The other thing that you notice that there was the problem with what he put out, he spells deferred retirement incorrectly. And people say, well, he just made the mistake. No, he didn't make the mistake. These are intentional things. It's almost like what I'm told they can do is they take 2 series of documents and they have a little alteration. It may be as much as just changing a period or a comma or something like that. Then they leak the document. So when you make the document public, they know exactly where you got it from. They know what the document is, and there's 2 sets of documents floating around. So he misspells that. peacetime, test assured. There's spelling and grammar mistakes in this whole thing. So when I saw it, I talked to the guys who pulled this off the website, and I said, it's the same game. They've been doing this for like 70 years. It's the same game. They're changing documents, they're altering, and you guys are starting to make the claim that these documents are real and you're going to get burned if you believe these are real documents. It doesn't mean that the information isn't real. So that's what they do. You take the real information, you spin it a little bit, and you put it out. And they do this all the time. If you take a look at the CIA, this has actually been described. If you're doing a movie in Hollywood, you're a director, and you're doing a movie on the CIA, you will be contacted by the liaison for the CIA, and they'll come up and say, oh, Dave, I hear you're doing a movie on the CIA. Is that correct? And then Dave goes, yeah. You ever been to the CIA? Would you like to come and see the CIA and maybe help you get some background on what's going on? So you have two choices. When someone leaks something or when you're doing a movie, you have two choices. You can either go kill the guy or you manage the guy. You get him going in the right direction. I'm your friend, and you start feeding him material, and you get him to go in the right direction. So all these different operations, all these different government operations will do that. You have to control the story. You've got to control how the media is portraying you. And you want to be portrayed like the good guy. The CIA said the good guys, they saved the world. This is how it's done. So they're altering the material. And I wrote this book called Managing Magic, and I'm doing Beyond Managing Magic, which will come out next, which will reveal what's happened just in the last year and a half. So my book was written before this latest thing with AATIP, with the New York Times. I talk about Tom DeLonge. I talk about all that because it's the same thing. They did it. I was in the 80s. As I said, I started in 1975. I've been in this since before Jesus was a carpenter. I've been in this game. I've seen these documents. I dealt with the people in the 80s, and it's the same game. It's almost like they got the same fingerprints on the documents. So this is the kind of stuff that they're leaking. And then he forgets to put quotation marks. And they'll say, oh, no, it was just a mistake. They just made a mistake in this document, which is to the Secretary of Defense. Here's another one of the documents that they leaked, and this talks about the various technical survey studies. So they have a bunch of programs that they're running, and what they're trying to look at is what is science going to look like in 2050. So they put out these contracts to various people who are working on zero-point energy, wormholes, all this kind of stuff, and they try to gather the latest material they have as to what have we got now, how can we advance this? Because in the end, all this stuff is military. They want to control it because you're going to build weapons out of it. You don't want the Russians to get it. You don't want the Chinese to get it. And so they put out all these, there's 38 programs, or 38 papers that they contracted out. And this is some of the ones, the stuff that they had listed here, like pulsed high power microwave weaponry and biomaterials. And so they're looking at this kind of stuff. One of the other documents that was put out was a picture of these DVDs. These are the 3 videos. If you know, the New York Times came out with the one video, with 2 videos, then a third one came out. So these videos, and they're short, and everybody says, well, where's the rest of the video? And then they say, well, that may be classified, that part of the video, that's why they may have released it. And then when we as researchers go, so the New York Times puts it out, and you say, oh, New York Times, it's for real. So you go to look for the New York Times, you try to get the story, and so you say, okay, to my friend, the guy who asked Hillary Clinton the UFO question, in 2016, became famous for asking this UFO question. I was talking to him, and I said, file, and let's get on it. Let's get an FOIA. Let's try to get the documents on this AATIP program. So he contacts them, and he's assured the same day that this stuff was released. I can assure you, this is from the head of public affairs for the Pentagon, says, we can absolutely assure you we did not release any videos. So the videos are out, and now it's like, well, who released the videos? And the To the Stars people will say, well, the government. Well, who in the government? And then they say, well, you'd have to ask the government. And this is this game that's played. So you put the videos out, which are legitimate videos of showing this very, very bizarre phenomena that's around this Nimitz aircraft carrier off the Pacific, off California, where the UFO is playing around. And I'll get into this a little bit later, what the UFOs are doing, is playing around, and all of a sudden they get a report. It's now where you guys are supposed to be. They're going on this target 20 miles away, and suddenly the UFOs are exactly where they're 20 miles away. It's playing around, and it appears, and they're going, how did it know where we were going to go? So it's this bizarre thing where the aliens are going like, hey, we're over here, and they're doing this stuff. So they released these videos, and these came out in this latest leak as well. And then there's one that they won't release, and I'm pushing these guys, and these are not government guys. These are researchers. We get into this problem with researchers. Suddenly, I've got possession of this. I'm going to control this story, and I'm not going to release this story, and for whatever reason. So they got a picture of a package. And the whole thing was that Lou Elizondo quit. He went with To the Stars, and these guys are going to disclose this stuff, and the government is helping them, although they want to identify who in the government is helping them. And there's a package, a picture of a video of a classified sort of a little box or a little carrier thing from a month before Tom DeLonge went public, from Lou Elizondo, which meant that Lou Elizondo was supposed to have retired the day before the big news conference they had, and actually a month before, he was handing over these videos to Chris Mellon, which indicates that this is all planned. It's just a game. They're running through this game, and it makes it look like they're doing this, but they're actually doing that, and that's how the game is played. So you have to see this, and what I'm going to show you in the majority of the lecture is that the intelligence behind the phenomena is doing exactly the same thing. Here's another thing. They've got an interview. They misspell a bunch of words. The heading is misspelled. They have, from this famous Nimitz thing, they've got an inside story of what happened and interactions, but you can't back it up. There's no headings. There's no document numbers. The government says no records. When you try to file an FOA, they say, no records. We have nothing. I don't know what you're talking about. And that's what you do. So you release the material. Nobody can confirm it. And they did that with Area 51. They did that with the story of the live alien. They've done it over and over and over again. You leak it, and nobody can confirm it. And everybody says, it's a hoax. And everybody walks away, but the story got out. And everybody knows that Area 51 is supposed to have crash-flying saucers, but nobody can prove it. So the latest one, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, the latest thing that's big in the UFO community is metals. People are finding metal that they believe is extraterrestrial. And they're doing all this analysis. Now, To the Stars has a program. They got some money from somewhere. I'm not sure where the money came from. They're doing analysis. I'm told they have 7 pieces. And they call it the ATOM program. And one of the things I've always hated is acronyms. I just hate acronyms. It's like crazy. I mean, it's like, why don't you just say what the word is? So I decided I'd create my own acronym. And it's TUTO. So, and it's my new theory of what the intelligence behind the phenomena is doing. And it's the theory of wow. And basically, in the end, this commercial that's coming up will describe exactly what I think the intelligence is doing. Now, try not to laugh till the very end, because you'll miss the last punchline. But here's a commercial that this is what I believe exactly the intelligence is doing.
They're really biting today, Don.
That is my belief, and I've sort of had this for a couple of years, and then I started to put it in chronological order, and it just all made sense. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get you to go, wow, that's all they're doing. They're raising consciousness. And I'll go through the whole program. So the way I looked at it like this, and it started with the metals, because as I'll get to the metals, is no 2 pieces of metal that have been recovered, crash saucer material, is the same. And so you go, is this coincidence? Is this random? Why are there no 2 pieces? And there's a lot of metal. There's a pile of metal. I'm going to show you some that I have, that's been the Canadian government had. There's a lot of metal around. And so the question is, why is it all different? And then it came down to, maybe this is just a science fair project on Alpha Centauri or Zeta Reticuli or something, where they tell the kids in school, they say, okay, we got these natives on Earth, and we got to get their attention. We want to get them some messages. We got their attention. So what are we going to do? And grade 1, I think what the kids in grade 1 would say, let's put lights on the craft. Now the key to this, and I always say to people, and it seems like a joke, but it's not a joke. The key is, why do UFOs have lights on them? So you can see them. That's why they have lights. We don't have lights on our craft. When we went to get bin Laden in Pakistan, do you think we kept the lights on when we went in? We had black op helicopters. Everybody had infrared. There was no lights. So why do they put lights on there? They put lights so you can see them. And when you start looking at UFO reports, you're going to see every possible connection of lights you can possibly think of. John Lennon is the one I always use. John Lennon had an object that was so close, he could hit it with a brick. And he had these white lights, off, on, going around the edge of the craft, and a red light on the top. And the question is, do you need flashing white lights like this to go through interstellar space? No, they just want to get his attention. And he's looking at the UFO, so that's grade 1 on this program. In 1975 is another example. When I had my sighting in 1975, which threw me down the rabbit hole, at the end of the year when Travis Walton was being abducted, there was a series of UFO incursions inside Air Force bases where they kept nuclear missiles. Loring Air Force Base in Maine, Wurtsmith Air Force Base in Michigan on the border, Minot Air Force Base, which is just south of us, and Malmstrom Air Force Base. Each one had an incursion, and the UFOs were inside the weapon storage area where they kept the nuclear weapons. They were in there, so why did they not turn the lights off? They had the lights very bright, and I could just hear them going, we're over here, can you see us? We're over here. And everybody's freaking out, and this thing is there, and it's just a message. It's not that anything more than, here we are, making you think, what's going on? This can't be ours. We must not be alone. Something's going on here, and they make you think. Rather than going in, like the U.S. military, into Iraq and saying, we're here to bring you freedom, democracy, Jesus, and McDonald's, and we need you to change your religion, and we need you to do this, and next thing you know, they're shooting at them, because that's not the way it works. This is the way that I think they have determined that they're going to get the messages across that they want to get across. So in 75, the same thing. They had the lights on when they went in. The Nimitz. The Nimitz story is the big story where they leaked the videos. The Nimitz thing, it was there for a week. And we always think that UFOs are random events. Let me absolutely assure you, it is not a random event. If you see a UFO, you are part of the game. There's no random, it's like these, we used to, in 75, we thought it was a random event. Things just flying along, we used to say, oh, it's going for a beer run. They were trying to figure out, like, what's it doing? Like, it's just flying along and not really doing anything. So the Nimitz, it was there for a week. If it was a random event, it had been there one time. It was like, we're here, and then the next day, and again, and then there's one in 2015, apparently it was there even longer than a week. Rendlesham Forest is a major UFO story. It was there at least 3 days and possibly 4 days. So it's this drip, 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 and they're there, and they make it this huge story. The Gimbal one I mentioned before, 2015, it was there for over a week. The Skinwalker Ranch is the famous, people know the Skinwalker Ranch, this famous story about this paranormal place in Utah that Bob Bigelow, the billionaire, bought, and then they put in people for 7 years and stuff like that. So this thing, they had all sorts of experiences there. They had paranormal experiences, they had portals opening up, they had big giant wolves, almost like the sizes of a small horse walking around and stuff like this, all this bizarre stuff. When that thing happened, they had 100 sightings in 6 years or 7 years when they investigated. George Knapp, the very famous guy who broke the Area 51 story, did not see anything. He was there all the time. He did not see one thing in 6 years. The same as John Alexander, who's a very famous sort of military guy in the UFO community, was a big guy in this research on this ranch. He didn't see anything either. They had 100 incidents. DIA people went there. So DIA, the Defense Intelligence people, went there. They saw stuff. And they went to Senator Reid, and Reid got this funding for this AATIP program. That's how it started. It didn't start with UFOs. It started with this paranormal ranch. They were trying to figure out this paranormal ranch. Can we get some technology from this? What's going on? We've got this thing in the ranch. We can set up cameras. We can do all this sort of stuff. And in the end, they couldn't discover a thing. They would, every time they would set the camera, it would happen off the camera. They had two cameras looking at each other. It ripped the wires down from the one camera. As the thing happened, they figured, oh, we got it. And then they found that the wires were ripped off the camera. It was, as they said, it was not only did it know what they were doing, it knew what they were going to do. And they did not discover it. That's why they sold the ranch. They could not discover a single thing because the phenomena always knew what they were going to do and messed around and did something else. So the question is, who saw the most stuff there? The guy that saw the most things, according to what I understand, is Dr. Eric Davis. Now, Eric Davis, the question is, Eric Davis sees this, so why is Eric Davis seeing this stuff and the rest of these guys aren't seeing stuff? Well, the key is that Eric Davis has got a PhD in astrophysics, and he had a UFO sighting. And he talks about this UFO sighting when he got his PhD degree at the party that they were having. He remembers this daylight sighting of him and his wife of this daylight triangle type craft with lights on it that basically, like me, threw me, like 75, just threw me off the cliff. And he became obsessed with the subject. He saw most of the stuff. So the question is it a random event or is it an event that is connected to Eric Davis? So if Eric Davis is part of the program, he saw the UFO, he's part of whatever's going on with the intelligence, it would make sense that he would see all the kind of stuff. But what they do is, what we have in the world is we believe this thing that there's external events that are happening to us. And we don't believe. We see a UFO and we say that's a separate event, and we don't realize that we may be connected to that. We may be manifesting that. We may be seeing that. We may be connected to what that thing's all about. We may have agreed to be part of whatever that thing is. So they called it the hitchhiker phenomenon, and they would follow Eric Davis home. And in his house, he would have the shadow people, he'd have all this stuff going on in the house, and they called it the hitchhiker phenomenon. And they twisted it because this is like, they're trying to do the military money stuff, so they twist it like, oh, this is like a really sort of evil thing, you know, it's following him around, it's following him home and stuff like that. And almost 90% of experiencers have paranormal phenomena. It's very simple. So is it random that these people just happen to have an experience in their house? Or are they connected to the phenomena? Is that why they're having the UFO experience and the paranormal experiences? The two are connected, and it may have to do, I believe it has to do with the person. The person is connected to both. There is no random thing. And in 75, and you probably haven't been along in this game as much as I have. In 75, if you saw one UFO, you were okay. If you saw two UFOs, if you came and said, well, I saw another one, you were crazy. Even I would have think you're crazy, because it doesn't happen. Everybody thought it was a random event. You happened to be in the right place at the right time, or the wrong place in the wrong time, and you saw a UFO. When in fact now you have experiencers that we call lifers. If somebody comes to me and they say they have this experience and it looks like it's some sort of abduction experience, we know it started when they were children. We know this now. You're a lifer. It goes through your whole life, and you're connected to the phenomena. You may even agree. If it's one life, it's an abduction. If it's multiple lives, if reincarnation is a fact, which I say is true, and I say there is as much evidence for reincarnation, more than there is for the existence of UFOs, if it's a multiple life, then you start getting into soul contract. Did you agree to be in this situation? Is it an abduction, or did you agree? And the people that have done research, Kathy Martin, who runs the MUFON Experiencer section, wanted to question this. She said, I don't know, I can't believe this is true. So she got a regression, and she said she couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. I chose this as she was being born. My famous friend Chris Bledsoe, very famous, there's going to be a big Hollywood thing you're going to see about him. Very famous guy, very dramatic stories, was regressed by a guy from Harvard University. In the regression, they said, when did you first encounter these beings? And he said, they have been with me since before I was born. And that's a key. If reincarnation is a fact, if you're living multiple lives, everything changes. Everything. They may have been with you before in the last lifetime, and it's part of a program that you've agreed to be a part of, to learn something or to teach other people stuff. This is a woman this woman was connected to the Canadian government. The Canadian government was using this woman to talk to an alien by the name of Alpha, and they were actually going to land a UFO at Suffield, Alberta, based upon the information this woman was giving. And what happened was the Canadian government wouldn't give a guarantee that they would allow it to take off, 100% assurance, and it was called off by the people who were arranging it. So she had a situation where she taught a guy from the CIA to channel. And this was actually leaked into a documentary by the U.S. military in 1975. And she taught this guy, and in the 1980s he came back and he said, they won't leave me alone. You got to get rid of them. You got to get rid of them. And she said, well, you were dealing with the Greys. You shouldn't have. I told you not to deal with them. And it's that hitchhiker phenomena. So she's saying it's because he dealt with this one particular species, but it may actually be that it's a part of his game. So it's going to follow him. It's going to follow every experiencer around. It's not a random event that happens one time. It's something that you're either part of it or you're not part of it. How many people know what this is? This goes back to the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. What it's called is angel hair. And this is part of what I used to say, that I knew there was something going on, because angel hair happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It does not happen anymore. Nobody even knows what it is anymore. But it was very common in UFO sightings. The UFO would fly by, this spider web stuff would fly down, it would hang off the trees on the ground and stuff like that. People would pick it up and it would sort of melt. They could never really get it analyzed because it would always sort of melt in their hands and that sort of stuff. So the pattern has changed. What happened in 1975 does not happen now. And people think that what's happening now happened then. I can guarantee you it's a completely different world. Now I'll get into that in a minute. Bud Hopkins. How many people know Bud Hopkins, the famous abduction researcher? When you hear his story, you think, oh, he sort of one day had a rational idea. I think I'll study abductions. Here's how it happened. He was actually watching the War of the Worlds. 1938, he was a 7-year-old kid. War of the Worlds was going on. On the radio, his parents were freaking out. The next door neighbors came with the gun. We're going to the top of the hill. We're going to take these beings on. We're going to defend the world. All this kind of stuff. So he was sort of terrorized from the time he was a little kid about this idea about aliens that aren't very good. 1964, he has a UFO sighting. And I've got the audio. When you hear the audio, you go, that guy's an experiencer. The thing's above the car, it's the middle of the day, it's sitting there, he's driving with these people, it's there, it's just hovering there, and it goes down. The next day he drives the distance to see how long did it take place, how high was it. He becomes sort of obsessed, starts reading UFO books. And then in 1975, and you tell me this is random, 1975, he's buying liquor from his buddy who runs the corner liquor store, and his buddy says to him, "Bud, I had this weird experience yesterday. I'm driving along the road, and there's this flying saucer about 100 yards from the road. And there was these aliens, and they were outside the craft, and they were digging holes." And Bud goes, "Really?" So Bud goes, and sure enough, there's 15 holes 5 inches deep in this field. And he's suddenly, like me, down the rabbit hole. He goes through, there's an apartment complex with a night watchman. He said to the night watchman, "Did you see something going on in that field the other night?" And the guy said, "Oh, yeah, it was there," and this sort of stuff. That's how he got involved. They dragged him down. It's like the old thing. Throw the thing out, pull him in, dragged him in. That, to me, is not a random experience, because when's the last time you heard of aliens outside a craft with shovels digging holes? I mean, it's like a setup. Jacques Vallee, the very famous experiencer, had a sighting in 1955. I really won't get into it. Steve Murillo runs the LA, so it used to be LA MUFON. I'll skip his audio here. He basically talks, he's a Navy pilot, and he has these sightings coming over. And what happens is his wife, they're on top of their house in northern Los Angeles, and his wife, they're in the pool. He's doing karate or something like that, and he's all sort of worn out. And so she gets him his glass of wine. She goes up to the pool that's on top of their house, and she says, "Oh, I forgot my own drink." So she goes back down, and this is the idea. She goes back down, and that's when the experience happens. They don't want her there, so she forgets. She goes down, and while this happens, these 5 objects come across over his head in a formation. First he thinks they're geese, and then they fly right over his head, and they're very particular, and then they go to the other side, and he watches them, and they make this very strange maneuver where 2 go, and they sort of move off. Now the question is, did they have to make that movement? Did they have to come in a V formation? And I said to him directly, I said, "Do you think this was a random event? You just happened to be there?" And he said, "No, I don't think it was a random event. It was like this was planned, that they were going to let him see this thing." And now he runs this sort of a MUFON group, this whole thing. He's dragged in down the rabbit hole, and he's doing this kind of stuff. Ariel School. This is the story of 1994. This movie's about to come out. This is a story about the Ariel School in Rhodesia, 1994. There's 62 school kids in a schoolyard at recess. And this object lands, and these sort of like gray type beings, but they're not really grays. They got sort of real tight-fitting suits on, black suits on. And the one girl, just to give you one of the ones, girl from Hamilton is one of the witnesses there. Her parents were Salvation Army ministers there, or missionaries. They're running along the edge of the schoolyard, and there's logs. So there's no fence, there's these logs, and they're running on these logs. So they're bouncing up and down, and they're going along, and all of a sudden she sees a flash out of the corner of her eye, and she looks sideways, and this gray-type alien being is hovering above the ground, but he's imitating them. He's going like this, and she's looking at this alien, and all of a sudden, boom, it's right in front of her face, and they're frozen. And they're standing there frozen, and then she said what's called rapid image cycling. And I'm not going to get into it, but there's a lot of cases of this rapid image cycling where suddenly, boom, 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 these images are coming like 100 a second into her thing. And she's getting this thing about technology. And it's technology, all these technological things. And basically what the message was you've got technology, but you could do better. And she said the last one was this giant sort of explosion, this last slide. She said that to her it didn't mean that the world was going to explode. The girl beside her was getting environmental images. These environmental images were coming out of the alien's eyes, and she's getting these environmental images. We're destroying the world. The trees are going to die. All this kind of stuff, and they get these images. So the question is, why does the intelligence land at a schoolyard? And there's one in Ireland. There's one in Russia, where a bunch of kids this thing landed in front of all these kids. The one in Australia had 300 kids involved. So the question is, do they really need to land at that schoolyard? Are they up to getting soil samples or whatever? Or are they just sort of putting it out there where these kids are all going to tell the story? Harvard University's professor is going to come there, big movies being made. And these images, these kids all talk about this telepathic images that were coming into their heads. And lots of kids got these. And these kids were between, 6 and 13 years old. So the question is, these kids are telling the truth, and they're trying to get across this sort of message. Here's the one from Russia. These kids, and they all draw what they see. So they make these appearances to these kids. Here's one with Travis Walton. And I know Travis, and everybody's got a different impression of what the Travis story was all about. And as you know, Travis, in the same year as my experience, was taken for 5 days. And the guys that were with him, he was on a crew where they were cutting down trees. They were all accused of murder. He was disappeared. They thought they had killed him. They're trying to find the body and stuff. And 5 days later, he reappears. Now, some of the theories are, well, they killed him and they had to bring him back to life. And it's like, no. If you look at this theory, it's like, no, they say, if we keep one guy for 5 days, that'll really make a big story. And he is still, to this day, the most famous contactee in the world. Almost every weekend, he is somewhere. And everybody knows who Travis Walton is. If Travis Walton had only been taken for 2 hours, you would never have known who he was. They keep him for 5 days. It's like, we need a movie. We need a big story. We need something out there. We need the people to talk about this. And it's the same thing. It's like, wow, this guy's been gone for 5 days. The theory of wow. Here's the UFO thing. You think that all UFOs are the same. So this is 1896, 1897. What you have is wooden ships flying around with propellers on them. And there was thousands of these things. There was not one or two. There was a lot of them on the western side of the United States. And so that's how the UFOs were seen then. Then you got the Foo Fighters that were on the wings of planes during World War II, the Germans and the Americans, these balls of light on the edges of the plane. So they changed from these wooden ships. And then after the war, this is the ghost rockets. So I'm going to play this ghost rocket thing. This is 1946, I believe. Ghost rockets are a phenomena that occurred in Sweden. And they've got piles of these stories of rocket items, or rockets that fly across and land in swamps. And they got piles of these. It's the only place in the world, except for one in Poland, it's the only place in the world where these happen. So what's the deal there? That they're doing this thing in Sweden. So this guy that you're going to see here is the guy that runs a big, huge paranormal library. It has 300 collections. UFO, paranormal, dowsing, everything you can think of. 300 collections. I did it on my White House UFO YouTube channel. I actually did the tour. The tour was 2 hours long, and I taped the entire tour. You're going from room to room, documents, books, just an incredible thing. And this guy tells a story about the ghost rockets.
They go all the way. We have sightings, of ghost rockets pretty much every year.
Is that right?
Yeah. Not that the last one that pitched into the lake, that was in 1999, as I remember. That was in the west of Sweden, close to the Norwegian border.
Is there ghost rocket sightings in other countries, or is it just
No, it's a typical Swedish phenomenon.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there you have it. It's just a Swedish phenomena. So why is that? If it's a random phenomena, why would it not appear in various countries? You can see this pattern where they're doing different things in different times periods in different places. Green fireballs. Right after World War II, you had these things called the green fireballs that were over all the military, all Hanford, all the places where they processed plutonium, where they built the atomic bombs, the military bases. These green fireballs all showed up. And they only were there for a couple of years, and then in the 1950s, they sort of went away, and along came George Adamski. So from 47 to 52, nobody was talking to aliens. There was all sorts of sightings being seen, but there was nobody talking to aliens. Adamski appears about a week after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb. Suddenly, this guy and his friend come forward and said, this ship landed, they gave us this message, stop the nuclear weapons, and that starts in 1952. And these are the type of crafts that he was seeing. Then you have the Betty and Barney Hill, which is a classic type craft that had windows in them. It doesn't happen anymore. Nobody sees, very few people see UFOs with windows in them anymore. In the 60s and 70s, all of them had windows. Very, very rare. And it's like they're almost like they're changing the pages of a book. Okay, watch this now, watch this now. Phoenix Lights is another example. So people describe the Phoenix Lights as being this craft that came a couple hundred feet off the ground over top of Phoenix, Arizona, and it was like a mile across. Now, whether it's the U.S. military or whether it's the intelligence behind the phenomena, do you really need a craft that's a mile across, and why are you flying at 100 feet above the ground? This is like, watch this, and across they come, and 10,000 people had that sighting. 10,000 people saw it. And again, it's this thing like everybody's going, wow, look at the size of that thing. And it's got the lights on it on the edges of the craft and stuff like that. And then it starts to make sense. If you just realize that maybe they're just trying to get our attention, you start to understand why all these sightings are different, why all this stuff is going on. Now, the grade 2 thing, they drag in the UFO researchers. So with me, all my friends went on with their life. I got dragged down the rabbit hole. And most researchers, like Lorian told her story last night, they have an event. And it's almost like you go through your life and you're living a regular life, and all of a sudden they wake you up. I actually call it the wake up. They wake you up and they say, okay, it's time for you to remember now. And they wake you up, and you have this dramatic experience, and it sort of sets you down this path to do, I'm doing what I'm doing, Lorian's doing what hers was doing. And you can say it's a random event, or they drove Lorian down this path, they drove me down this path to do things. Or I came into this life, if it's reincarnation, I came in, and this is what I agreed to do. So they drag in the researchers, and then they do the screen image thing. So you have a lot of alien things where aliens appear like rabbits and deer. And the one woman who they're going to supposedly make a movie about her story, she actually had a being called Da. And she said to Da, she said, are you actually an alien? And he went, no, I'm not. And she said, well, then why do you come looking as this ugly-looking gray thing? And he said, ugly-looking gray thing? You ever look in the mirror, he said to her? And she said, what do you mean? Because she has big teeth. And he said, when you smile, we think you're going to eat us. And so you have these things, and it's not one or two experiences. There's a few experiences who will say, no, they were basically told no. And the other one is, a lot of experiences you'll see where it's a flesh and blood alien, and it turns into a ball of light, and then it disappears. So is it a flesh and blood alien, or is it a ball of light? And if it's a ball of light, does it eat bacon, eggs, toast, and coffee in the morning? And so when you start going through the actual details of this stuff, it becomes very weird. It's not the nuts and bolts, and that would be the number one lesson I teach you. If you think this is nuts and bolts, the UFO phenomena, you're never going to solve it. You need consciousness. That's the whole thing. That the world, if it's nuts and bolts, it's one world. If the ground of being is consciousness, and consciousness creates matter, it's a completely different world. Everything changes. So this is where they're sort of teaching us this thing, and we can't figure it out. We're just going, wow, that thing, it was a being, and then it turned into a ball of light, and then it disappeared. And there are these sort of indirect lessons, rather than confronting you face to face, because if they confront you face to face, you just go, get out of here, leave me alone. So you have this thing with the screen imaging, shadow people. I've got the stats later. I'll tell you exactly how many people see. This is the ball of light thing. The wolf at Skinwalker Ranch. So Skinwalker Ranch, they had guns. Everybody had a gun there. And they had these sort of negative experiences. I worked with Mission Rama. If you know what Mission Rama is, it's a group of Latino people who do these channelings and praying for world peace and stuff. And they can make almost like a CE5. They can bring the thing in, but they can also open up what are called Zendras from time to time. And these Zendras open and the aliens come out of the Zendra. There are no weird things. There are no evil things in their experience. But they're treating it like a religious experience. They treat it like they're praying, they're oming, they're trying to raise their vibration and stuff like that. On the Skinwalker Ranch, everybody's walking around with a gun. It's like military. It's Defense Intelligence Agency people. And the first experience they have is the guy's he's under a shooter, and this is where it comes down. Are you manifesting part of what's coming in? So this big giant wolf comes, and it's a huge wolf, and then he tries to grab a cow and pull a cow out of one of the fences. So the guy takes this .357 Magnum at point blank range and shoots this wolf. And the wolf just looks at him like nothing, didn't mean anything. So the question is that a flesh and blood wolf? It looks at him, and then first he takes a 2x4 and he hits it over the head, and it just looks at him, and then he shoots it with the thing. Then he gets this deer rifle, and he starts shooting this wolf with a deer rifle. And there's pieces of the deer, or the pieces of this wolf flying off. The wolf just goes walking off into the bush. He takes these pieces of matter, and they're all rotted already. And so you start to look. This is not as clear flesh and blood, nuts and bolts as you think it is. It gets really weird, and you start looking at, is there something behind that? Is there some sort of consciousness thing where it's not really physical? It looks physical, just like this looks like it's solid. We now know from science it's not solid. It's almost all space. Everything's all space. It just appears to be solid. This is the one that I love the best. This is a guy, this story, and I can't see why the guy would make up the story. The UFO lands, and the guy comes out of the UFO, and he says, can you get me a pail of water? So he comes across the galaxy, and he needs a pail of water, and he sends this guy off to get a pail of water. The guy comes back, and the thing flies off. So what's the point of that? The point is that this guy's going to run around and say, this UFO's in the yard, and it's just the thing. It's raising consciousness, getting people to talk, because that's the way consciousness rises. It really doesn't matter whether you have it right or wrong. If everybody's talking about it, eventually the consciousness will rise enough where it'll make that flip, and it'll almost like you say, when did gays get their rights to be humans? Or when did the African Americans get rights to be average Americans? And you go, I don't really know when it was. And it just happens, and nobody's really going to know when it does happen. So this is what they're doing, is they want people to talk about it. So the grade 3 class on this foreign planet, what they're doing is something much more complex. So they're doing the nuclear thing. So they go to Maltrum, and this is part of the To the Stars thing. They have this as an evil thing. Like they went and they shut these nuclear missiles down. And this is a threat to the United States of America. And I'm going, a threat? You should cancel the Nobel Peace Prize for the next 20 years and give it to the aliens for that. I mean, that's unbelievable. If you could shut down all the nuclear missiles in the world, how is that evil? I mean, they just shut these missiles down, and in some cases, they actually made the missiles launch, where they went down, the guy's watching the countdown, and it starts it, and then it says, missile away. And the guy's absolutely flipping out, and then they phone the thing, and they say, we've launched the missile. It just went off by itself, and they say, no, nothing launched. And I can just see the intelligence, or the aliens, whatever they are, sitting in the craft, just laughing, like, oh, I wonder if they got the message. And they are very concerned. Anybody in the UFO community will tell you, they are very concerned. There's a lot of activity. My experience, in 1975, it started in February of 1975. It basically started to end in November of 1975. South of me was the North Dakota. There's 300 nuclear missiles, Minuteman III nuclear missiles with 3 warheads on them each, and could take out the whole world. And in 1975, they built the only anti-missile unit that ever went into operational in the United States. They put in 100 new nuclear missiles to try to shoot down the Russian missiles that were coming in. And as soon as they put the first missiles in there in February 1975, on our side of the border, suddenly, here's all these UFOs. In November, they negotiate with the Russians. They stop the thing and they take the treaty out. They shut the base down. The UFOs go away. They're very concerned about nuclear weapons, from my perspective. And they're trying to get the message across, that we don't like this, and that's why they do this stuff of shutting down missiles and starting missiles up. The NORAD thing, again, I mentioned this before, in 1975, they went in the nuclear weapon storage areas inside these bases along the Canadian-U.S. border. And that was just to get a message across. They didn't do anything. They just hovered there. Everybody wet their pants, and then they flew away. And they're just trying to get across this message. 1947, I tried to find the video, but it's on a flash drive. 1947, we dropped 2 atomic bombs. We kill 100 and some odd thousand people. And we now know we dropped it on a civilian area. We didn't drop it on it was purposely dropped on civilians. And it was detonated at 1,500 feet because that would cause the most damage. And so we do this, and I have some photographs from a guy who was sent in by the U.S. Marines a couple of days later to look at the damage. And here's, clear as day, flying saucer right over the harbor in Nagasaki a couple days after they dropped the atomic bomb. So they have a great interest in nuclear weapons. Crop circles, why do you let down crop circles? Why would they make a crop circle? And why are all crop circles different? If they want to disclose, they land and tell you what's going on. If they want you to think, they put this crop circle and everybody goes, wow, how did they do that? Wow, and then it gets more elaborate, and everybody's going, wow. And everybody's looking at it, and everybody's trying to interpret what the message is, and they make you think. If they wanted to give you the message, they wouldn't put the crop circle, they just give you the message. So you see this thing, and it only starts in 1976, and I'll show you how it starts. They're all different. Landing traces. You have in the 1970s, 80s, what would happen is the thing would come, it would land, it would burn the grass, it would leave these tripod marks, and then it would fly away, and it was called landing traces. There has not been a landing trace, basically, for the last 20 years. There's 4,000 of them, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then it's just like, okay, let's do something different. Let's put in crop circles. And they start with the crop circles. There are no landing traces. No matter what anybody tells me, it doesn't happen anymore. So the question is, what are they doing? And the landing traces would be the same thing. They could land without burning all the grass and leaving tripod marks. They do it to leave a calling card, leave a message. So they do the landing trace thing. Landings with aliens, I'll leave that out. Here's the crop circle thing. This is kind of interesting. This is how the crop circle, and you may not know this, how the crop circle thing started. I'm good friends with Colin Andrews, who came up with the term crop circles. And I'm going to play you an audio here of a message. So what happens is the first crop circle seen by Colin Andrews in 1983. He keeps quiet the fact that he's an experiencer. He's been encountering the aliens since 1950. He keeps it quiet. He sees this crop circle in the field in 1983. He's driving. He sees this crop circle and he said, my life completely was over. Basically, my life was changed when I saw that crop circle. But it starts a couple of years earlier, 1976. He's a communications guy. He's got the first reel-to-reel tape recorder that he'd bought. He's got it in the living room. It's sitting on the ground, and he's going to test this thing. He's got the microphone. He pulls the microphone across the carpet. The TV is going in the background. And then he turns on the tape recorder. And as he turns on the tape recorder, the TV goes zoot. And I think 2 million people in Britain saw this. The TV goes zoot, and this alien comes on the TV and gives this message. Now, because he turned the tape recorder, as he turned the tape recorder on, this started, he got the whole thing on tape. I'm going to play about 30 seconds of this message. Now, you can sort of see the message. It's hard to hear, because basically it's the TV and this message going on at the same time. People can't read it, so let me go. I'll just read it. Here's what the message said, and you got to remember, this is about 5.5 minutes long. We come to warn you of your destiny, of your race, and your world, so that you may communicate to your fellow beings the course that you must take to avoid disasters which threaten your world, and the beings on our world, and the beings on our worlds around you. This is in order that you may share in the great awakening as the planet passes through the new age of Aquarius. The new age can be a time of great peace and evolution for your race, but only if your rulers are made aware of the evil forces that can overshadow their judgment. And it goes on for about 5 minutes. So Colin gets this. He's got it on tape. ITN was the network that broadcast it. Everybody's flooding ITN. What's going on? What happened to my TV? What's this alien message thing on here? Colin is part of the investigation. ITN does 1 or 2 investigations. The British government does a couple of investigations. The only thing they are able to determine, this is 1977, I believe, just after my sighting, is that there was 2 towers that were affected, 2 of these TV towers that were affected. And those TV towers sent the signal out through southern Britain exactly where the crop circles would appear in the coming years. That's the only thing that was determined, that it was beaming to that area. And then the crop circles start, they become more complex, and they would put on crop circles that people would say, there's no way anybody could create this. So it's more spectacular, it's more spectacular. And I'll show you that when we get to cattle mutilations. Great, this is the metals. And this is breaking right now. There's stories right now breaking about these metals that they have. The Maury Island starts in 1947, and this is where I got this idea, where it confirmed this is what they're doing. 1947, this happens in Washington, Maury Island. There's a UFO flying by, and it looks like it's going to crash. And this UFO, it's like the bird with the broken wing that's trying to get you away from the nest, and it's flipping around, it's like it's going to crash, and everybody's watching this UFO, it's going to crash, it's going to crash. And all of a sudden it goes, and it shoots this metal out and flies away. And everybody goes and gathers the metal up. And this has happened, I'm going to try to track them, 12 at least times through history, where this same thing, the UFO is going to crash or whatever, and it shoots this metal out, and the people pick it up. Now, before, we didn't have the technology to analyze it. People say, let's just slag the guys making it up or whatever. Now we have the technology, and what they've just started to discover from this kind of material, that some of them, for example, the isotopes are out. We have certain isotopes in, say, metal or whatever it is, that will be there, and the isotopes are up by about 30%. And they know this didn't come from Earth, because the isotopes are all messed up. And so I say, like the grade 6 class is saying, they say, what do you guys want to do? And they say, let's give them some weird metal, and we'll change the isotopes, and we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll throw this metal down there, and that'll really get them to think. There's no other explanation why they would do this weird thing where they're shooting this metal, and it's called extruded metal. And To the Stars has a number of these pieces that they're starting to analyze of this extruded metal. Crash. They come across the galaxy, and the skeptics have brought this up, and it's a valid point. They come across the galaxy, and then they crash one after another. So are they crashing, or is this done purposely? And all the material that's dropped and the crash material, it's all in little pieces. So if it's so highly advanced, why is it break into these little pieces that people can take home and gather up and stuff like that? So you have this crash thing, whether this is an intentional thing or whether this is a random event, where these crashes. 1945 piece is one that was, I handled this piece. To the Stars has this piece. They're doing analysis on this piece. And again, they're all different. This is what To the Stars says. There are two classes of samples. Material that was released as the UAP, they call them UAPs, was hovering. So it's sitting there, and all of a sudden it starts shooting this metal out, and people are watching, and they pick up the metal. And the material that makes up parts of the structure or the system. So that's like the crash material. Here's the one crash. This is the most famous one. This is called the bismuth magnesium piece. So it's in layers, 27 layers, and is put down one atom at a time. So they look at it and it goes, there's no way we could do this. Put this thing in one atom at a time, and it's 27 layers. And they think that there's a propulsion system based upon this. They think that they can bombard this thing with terahertz energy and it will levitate. And I think, no, it's probably just another one of those pieces that they just threw out and said, let's give them one that's layered. That'll really make them think. And they throw this piece out, and people grab it. So they're going to do this analysis. This is Jacques Vallee. This is 2015. You really can't read it. I can't even read it. But this is all the extruded metal and pieces that he had. And you can go down this list of about 20 pieces, and there are no two pieces that are the same. Now, what's the chances that there's no two pieces the same? This is the organization that's going to be doing the analysis on these metal. This stuff is all leaked out. This is the piece that I had. My friend gave it to me in Winnipeg, and then he decided he wanted it back, and he allowed me to cut a small piece off of this. This came out of a site in New Mexico, where a high-level government official actually took two professors from the University of North Carolina there and blindfolded them and took them onto the site. And I'm going, why would he blindfold them? I know where the site is. It was my friend that showed him where the site was. But that's the one piece. I've actually got a piece of this. This is a piece, this guy will be on my radio show next month. This is a piece from 1985 that's made out of silver, I believe it is. And it was shot out of a craft in 1985. And the weird thing about that is in 1947 in Denmark, there was almost an identical piece found. Almost identical, but we don't know if it's the same material. I'm going to bet it's not the same sort of material. So this is the 47 piece out of Denmark. Here's a story that describes the same sort of thing. Is this random? It was November of 2006. The following story was told. On a summer's afternoon in 1996, a Vietnam veteran named Benny lived in a rural central Ohio, southwest of Newmark, observed a large box-like UFO glide over his home at an altitude of 100 to 200 feet. The UFO, as reported to Benny, was at least the length of a commercial airliner, on and on. So Benny heard a thud. He hears this dull thud from somewhere nearby, but was transfixed by the dramatic object flying overhead. It was only after the craft had vanished to the west over the tree line that Benny thought to look for the source of the thud. And he found, lying in gravel along his dirt driveway, this molten metal. The material appeared to be a blob of solidified and yet still hot aluminum. So he gathers this piece up, and it's the same thing. They do this thing, they let you see the craft, they drop this metal, and people would say, well, maybe they're having trouble. No, they're doing the same thing every time. Here's one. This is a piece of metal, and this one you will know because it comes from this particular sighting. This is Stephen Mikulak, 1967 at Falcon Lake, Manitoba. He sees this craft, it's sitting there, he goes, he puts his head in, he yells in these different languages, nobody answers, whatever, he backs up, the craft starts to rotate, he gets burned, and he ends up in the hospital with these burn marks on his stomach in a grid pattern, and it becomes one of the most famous Canadian cases ever. What most people don't know is that there was metal found at the site. Same thing. This metal is found in the cracks of the big rock that this thing was sitting on. So this metal seems to show up. The Rendlesham Forest case, we now know has metal. They recovered metal. Nobody knows exactly the story, but there is a piece of metal, and To the Stars has this piece of metal. So it's almost like every major case, they drop this piece of metal. This is Wilbur Smith. This is the guy that ran the Canadian government UFO program. He handled a lot of metal. He was a high-level Canadian government official, and the Americans were sending up material to Canada to be analyzed. Most people don't realize this. We were very close in the field in the 1950s till 1954 when they shut the program down. Here's his son James Smith talking about the metal that was coming from the United States to his father to be analyzed.
many times I do remember blue military cars pulling up to the house and leaving packages of things for him to do metallurgical analysis on. And we'd asked him what they were, and he said they were chunks that unidentified things that the military had either shot down or found.
Unidentified things, or did he actually use the word flying saucers? Or
Yes, on a couple of instances, I remember packages about the size of a loaf of bread coming in. The box would contain a chunk of metal that he'd been told that the Air Force had shot a chunk off of a flying saucer, and they'd already done some analysis of it. And would like him to have a go at it too. So.
Now, was this the American Air Force or the Canadian Air Force?
Well, I don't remember what color the plate it was, but I mean, it came from the States, whether it was delivered to the house by a Canadian.
Yeah, so it came from the States. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
You actually saw some of these pieces as well, Jim?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I saw them when you unpacked the box, see what's in there, and take a look at it.
How old would you have been then?
Oh, well, looking 10 to 17 in the age group.
Did you get an opportunity to handle any of them? How would you know what was an unusual-looking piece of metal at the age of 17?
I got to handle a few of them. One was a chunk about the size of a brick, semicircular in shape, very smooth metal except where the jagged edges of where it had been disconnected from whatever it belonged to. It was quite heavy in terms of its size. He had analysis done of that one. I remember seeing that particular analysis sheet.
Okay, one more. This is a guy from Ohio who went to see Wilbur Smith. He was dying of cancer. He went to see Wilbur right at the last couple months, and this is what he said Smith told him, or he describes being with Wilbur Smith.
During the actual operation, however, of this, when Mr. Smith was on his feet, he was constantly visited by both Canadian government officials as well as American government officials. These were, of course, upper echelon people with attaché cases that were chained and locked to their wrists to make sure, of course, that none of the information was dropped or left behind in a station, a bus station or something. And so he had a number of these visits. They had samples they wanted him to analyze of hardware, that is actually metal that had been found.
1960, along the St. Lawrence River, June the 12th, between 3 and 4 a.m., there's a huge explosion, and the next morning they find these two huge pieces of metal along the shore of the St. Lawrence. One was sort of partly underwater. They recovered at the Canadian, Wilbur Smith actually, one piece was sold for scrap. The second piece ended up in someone's yard, and they started doing analysis on this piece. Art Bridge was a guy who did the metallurgic analysis. He lived in Manitoba where I was. I asked him at one point, I said, how much UFO material did you and Wilbur handle? And he said, tons of it. So they had a lot of material that they were handling. Everybody thinks it's a random event, and yet there's a lot of this stuff. And so what they did is they took this piece, they did analysis, and this is actually an analysis done by the Canadian government. They actually analyzed this piece, but of course it doesn't match any of the pieces that from Tom DeLonge or from the United States or from Ohio or whatever. It's a completely different piece, but it was actually analyzed by the Canadian government. And Wilbur Smith believed that it was extraterrestrial. He believed, and the question was, well, was this a craft that just happened to crash, or was this a purposeful thing where they dropped this material? Because it was right near the guy who ran the Canadian government UFO program, and of course he discovered it right away, and they started doing this analysis. This is the 52 piece that the story was they shot it off a UFO, but again it was dropped into the yard of a CIA guy. And this guy, it was couriered to Canada. We know the guy that couriered it, and this is a piece that Wilbur talked about quite a bit, that he had this 52 piece. This is an interesting story. This is a piece, it's like a bronze piece. It's held by Uri Geller, who's the great spoonbender, psychic guy. And he tells the story. And I've talked to Uri, I've emailed Uri, and he's replied to this. Uri tells the story, this is the story. John Lennon had his sighting, he had his sighting in August of 1975. He said John Lennon invited him to a restaurant. They both lived in New York City and that part of the thing. They used to go to this restaurant, they'd sit in the back of the restaurant. And he said, John called me over and he said, you're into this UFO stuff. He said, I want you to take this. And he gives him this piece, this bronze piece. And he said, I'll tell you what happened. I woke up in the middle of the night, and Yoko was sleeping, and I couldn't wake her up. She was lying there. And you hear this all the time with abduction cases. Almost like the guy I told you about Northern California, his wife forgets to get the drink, and she goes down, and while she's getting the drink, this thing happens. And so they take the person out, and it's like you and this object in the experience. Everybody else is cut out. Like the first UFO that John Lennon saw, we talked to his girlfriend. She's done interviews about this. May Pang was the girlfriend at the time. She said that she looked out over this thing was there for 10 minutes flying around. And then she looked out and she said, the weirdest thing was, there was a balcony below us, and these people didn't come up from the balcony. And they were always on the balcony, and we were naked, and we were yelling and screaming and taking pictures for 10 minutes, and these people didn't come up. She said, I couldn't figure out why they didn't come up. And she said, the other weird thing was, everybody was gone. She looked at all the condos and all the apartments, and big, huge, 40, 50-story things, and they were all gone. All the lights were out. And then this voice came in her head, said they all went to the Hamptons. And she went, oh, okay. And so we actually contacted her, and we said, doesn't that seem a little strange? Everybody in New York went to the Hamptons that night. And it's called the Oz effect. So this is the Oz effect. So Lennon wakes up. He can't wake up Yoko Ono. And he looks, and he thinks that the penthouse is on fire in the hallway. There's light coming as if there's a fire in the hallway, and light coming through the doorknob. And he can't wake her up, so he goes to the door, and he opens up the door. And what he says, there was these effing bug people standing there. And so he went to attack them, and they forced him back just with thought. They kept him back with thought. And next thing, he woke up. He was on top of the covers. Yoko had woken up. He told her the story, and he's got this object in his hand. So he gives it to Uri Geller, and he says to Uri Geller, this may be my ticket to another planet, but I don't want it. You can have it. I don't want anything to do with it. So he gives it to Uri Geller. Now the controversy is there was offers to analyze this thing, and Uri always said, I never had it analyzed because I was always afraid it was going to be made in Taiwan. And I actually contacted him as well, and I talked about this sort of thing, and he said the same thing. He said, I have it on my possession all the time. It's with me wherever I go. And he said the same thing. I've never had it tested because I'm afraid it might be made in Taiwan. So this is a bizarre thing where John Lennon is actually given a piece of metal. Here's one from a friend of mine. This just happened a couple weeks ago. I was on a radio show talking about this metal stuff, and then he contacted me, sort of like he's kind of a high level, got a lot of experiences, and he said, oh, just for the sake, and he starts telling me about this piece. So he's got a piece, and what it was an orb. An orange orb is flying along over this driveway, and the metal is dripping off this orb. Doop, 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 as it goes along, and this is a piece of the metal on the driveway, and they scraped this piece of metal off, and they got that for analysis. And there again, it looks like they just want you to think. They're just like, oh, let's drop some metal. And he gathers it up, and they run off of this stuff. So that only happened a couple weeks ago. Now here's the one that everybody always has trouble with, and how do you explain this? The mutilation thing. Number one, almost all cattle mutilations are bloodless. Why are they bloodless? If they're not bloodless, they're not mysterious. And I think they take the blood out just to say, boy, they'll say, we couldn't do this. This is just amazing. Where's the blood go? There's not a single drop of blood. So they do this. And if you listen to Linda Howe, she'll always describe it as the mysterious bloodless cattle mutilations. And if there was blood, then you couldn't make it mysterious, and you couldn't build it up. So for number one, they're bloodless. Environmental. And this comes down to what people don't realize. When you look at the data, Linda Howe disagrees with this, but the other major researchers who work on cattle mutilations will say this. Number one, David Perkins, who's one of the top researchers and got the biggest catalog, says all cattle mutilations occur downwind and downstream from nuclear power activities, uranium, all of them. The other person that's researched was the NIDS organization, which was Bob Bigelow, the billionaire. They had lots of money. Their analysis tied it into mad cow disease. The major researchers, except for Linda Howe, believe now that what this is a monitoring operation. And so you don't have cattle taken in feedlots. And why is that? Because in feedlots, they're not eating the grass. What you want is cows that are free-ranging who are eating the grass. The pieces that they're taking are the tongue, the udder, that sort of stuff that will be affected, where you'll be able to see the contamination. And you start looking at this thing where it's all downwind, downstream from nuclear power activities, and it only happens in Christian countries. It doesn't happen in non-Christian countries. And the most bizarre thing, so people say, no, they're doing this thing. The most bizarre aspect of it, I don't know if we have it here, is, Oh no, the cats. No. The most bizarre thing about the whole thing is that if you take a look at the cows, people say, oh, it's terrible, they're doing these cows. And I always say, let's let the cows vote. We say we're the good guys, and there's been 10,000 cattle mutilations over 50 years. That's 200 a year. So I'm representing the cows, and I say to the cows, okay, you got two choices. You got these intelligence that's doing this, and it's 200 cows a year. Or you got the U.S. cattle industry, 41.7 million cows. You take the aliens, you got a chance. You go the other way, you ain't got no chance. They're all dying. And so we say, well, we got a justified reason why we kill 41 million cows, why we euthanize 4,000 cats a day, why we kill 9,000 chickens a year, 9 billion chickens a year, 2.7 trillion fish. And we have, because the idea we have is they don't have souls. They're just objects. We use them. They don't have souls. And so what you do is you have this situation where the only cow that hasn't been mutilated is a Brahmin cow. And that is significant because they all come, most of them are exported from India. They're considered sacred. They treat them different. And there's never been, of all the cattle mutilations, Chris O'Brien, who's one of the top researchers, said he's looked for years and years and years, and he's never found a single Brahmin cow mutilated. So they're taking cows that are free-ranging, and there's this religious implication with these Brahmin cows. And when you start looking at the mutilation thing, again, the number one thing that I say people leave out in the cattle mutilation thing, and I've asked Linda how, I'll ask anybody who's doing cattle mutilations, because they want to do the sort of the candy, you know, look at the cow, look what they did this, they cut this, and everybody looks, and people taking pictures. The key is they come in, and some people think it's the government. I say it's absolutely not the government. There's no way the government would chance using SEAL Team 6 with the most advanced helicopters they've got to go in and get a cow that you could buy a week later at the cattle thing by putting your little tag up and say, I'll buy that cow. The risk is just too high. Because if you look at bin Laden operation, the top technology, the top helicopters, and we crashed a helicopter. We take Somalia, we crashed helicopters. You take the operation to get the Iranians out in the late 1970s. We crashed a bunch of helicopters. The chances of them doing 10,000 cattle mutilations and not crashing a helicopter is zero. There's no way you're doing this. And why risk it? Why risk sending helicopters when you can buy the cow? So I don't think it's the government. But I forgot where I'm going with this. So you have the intelligence comes in, it gets the cow, it does whatever it's doing to the cow to get these parts of the organs to determine, you know, the contamination or whatever. But everybody leaves out the second part of the story. And I always say, and I've said lots of times to Linda, I say, Linda, why do they go back and drop the cow? You've got the cow already. You're in there. It's like going, grabbing bin Laden, getting out, and then going back and dropping his body. Go back into the war zone and take a chance and drop the body. But they come back and they drop the cow from 100 feet up, and right in the front neighbor, right in the farmer's front yard. It's a message. It's definitely a calling card. And I say to Linda, the reason they drop the cow, the reason they do this, is because they want you to go take pictures. They want it out there. This is a calling card. They're saying something's going, and you can say, okay, they're doing genetic. The genetic thing doesn't make any sense at all. Why would you do genetic? You could buy, same thing, you could buy the cows. You could go into a cattle yard and get all sorts of genetic stuff. I don't think it's got anything to do with genetics. It's a sign of this thing. They're doing a monitoring operation, and most of the main cattle mutilation people now agree it's some sort of monitoring operation by somebody, because we're contaminating that soil. It doesn't happen in Africa. It doesn't happen in a lot of countries. It happens in this place where we've got these nuclear weapons, or we've got contamination and stuff like that. And the cats. So they have the thing with the cats now. And there's 250 cats, and then I point out, whatever they're doing, there must be a reason for this. They're getting these cats because we euthanize 4,000 cats a day. We consider them to be objects. We euthanize them. 1.3 million cats a year in the United States. And we're the good guys. We're killing these cats, but we've got a justified reason why we're killing all these cats. And so they do this kind of stuff. And I believe it's this monitoring operation that's going on. Here, an example. October 1975, 2 mutilated animals were discovered near the entrance to the nuclear weapons factory in Rocky Springs, near Denver. And again, in August 1976, another animal was found at the entrance to the headquarters of NORAD, Right at the front door, they drop it. And that's a restricted airspace. So you've got this thing where they come in there and they drop it, and I say it's the same thing. It's making people go, wow, what's going on? And at first you think it's like genetic stuff, and when you start looking carefully, you realize there are these patterns that sacred cows aren't taken, cows in feedlots aren't taken, and that they're taking organs that show contamination downrange from nuclear power activities. Now the abduction stuff, we'll go through this. Again, I mentioned this thing with Bud Hopkins, 1975. They drag him into this whole thing with this, these aliens with the shovels. Betty Hill, her experience, the guys have hats. They're wearing like baseball hats. And then the next one, they're not wearing, like that's the only case I think really where there's baseball hats. So the type of beings that are being seen are different all the time. They can walk through walls. So they're doing this thing, and they're sort of giving us this wow. They're going through walls. They're turning into balls of light. They're doing all this sort of spectacular stuff. This is one that gets into music. Ace Frehley, who is with KISS, he's an experiencer. He was taken, and he talks about waking up in the front yard, and I've woken up in a lot of weird places. This is the weirdest ever. And they leave a 27-foot burn circle in his backyard because he's checking his body for scoop marks and stuff. Goes into the shower. He knows he's been on a ship. He knows something happened. And then he finds this burn circle in his backyard, and it's 27 feet across, which is his lucky number. So you get this kind of thing where they send these signals. Triangles. A number of experiencers will find triangles on their body. So the question is, why do you need to put a triangle on somebody's body? And I say the reason they do that is because you could wake up and say, nah, it was just a dream. It didn't really happen. And you look at your arm and you see this triangle and you go, oh, it wasn't a dream. It's just a signal to say, nah, this ain't a dream. This actually did happen. And it's making people think. So people gather these marks that are found on people's bodies. I don't think it really has anything to do with anything. It's just to get people to think, yes, this is for real. This is a bizarre phenomena. It's not dreams. It's not people making stuff up. If you didn't have the marks, people would just say, oh, these people just imagined this story. That's where they got the evidence to prove it. Coronado. They allow memory. That's the other thing. So people will say, oh, they're doing this terrible stuff. They're abducting people and all this kind of stuff. And yet, even in the most... What's the name? Lorian, what's the name of that girl from Texas you were talking about yesterday? She had the thing, she hated the Greys, all that sort of stuff. She died, 39 or whatever she died. Carla Turner. So even Carla Turner hated the Greys with a passion. She would say they're liars, they're this, they're that. And she talks about her husband. That when she and her husband were trying to figure out what was going on, her husband couldn't get any memory, he couldn't be regressed. And so she said, I'll teach you how to do self-hypnosis, because that's what she was using. So she said she started to give him self-hypnosis, and boom, he was under like that. And then he's under, and the being is doing a scoop mark in his leg, and the being says to him, it is now time for you to remember. If the beings wanted to do this stuff, they wouldn't turn the lights on in the craft. They wouldn't allow people to, because they can make people black out. Because most people don't realize they're abductees till later on in their life. They get the awakening. They have an experience that happens that wakes them up, and they suddenly realize it's been going on their whole life. So they can block your memory, so why would they allow you to remember? If this is a sort of a black ops operation where they don't want anybody to know what's going on, they just blank out your memory. But they're allowing people to remember what's going on. And this happens over and over again, and then the more you go for help, or they give you, you're all stressed out, and then you go for a regression, and it sort of opens up, and then you get the whole story, and then you run around, and at first it's very fearful. Although a lot of people, when they first had it, it's very fearful. And then they go get regressed, and they suddenly realize what's going on, and they suddenly become a messiah. It's like, oh, wow, I'm picked, I'm a messiah. And the fear goes away, and suddenly they believe they've got some sort of mission. And I'll ask every experiencer. They say, I've been on board the ship, and I always say the first question is, do you believe you have a mission? And they all go, either they say, yeah, I know what it is, or they say, I think so. I don't know what it is, but somehow I think I've got a mission, as if they've been chosen. And that's this whole one world, one life. So if it's one life, then abductions are people being taken against their will. If it's multiple lives, and you can go to the regressionists, we'll go back and say, if you go and take them back like Chris Bledsoe or Steve Boucher, a musician out of Ontario, you take them back, they'll say, oh yeah, the alien was with me before I was born. Steve Boucher, a musician in Ontario, said they were trying to talk him into going. He said, I'm not going to that place. No way, I'm going to Earth. No way. And the alien's talking to him before he was born. it all changes if it's multiple lives. Then it's experience. Then you're agreeing to do certain things in your life, and then you have to take personal responsibility. You can't say, oh, Hillary did this, Donald Trump did this, this happened, that happened. I've got a terrible life because of all these other things. You're choosing the cards you're being dealt. And the thing is to play the cards. So once you have multiple lives, then the abduction thing changes. Because I asked Mary Rodwell, who's done 3,000 clients. I said, Mary, is it 100% soul contract? She said, yes, I absolutely believe. If you regress them all back, they will all say, I agreed to this situation, to be in this situation. This is we're talking about these marks, these triangle marks. This is a guy in Winnipeg who was cured from cancer. This happened. He told me this story. He said, I got up in the middle of the night, and he said, my head was wet. And he goes, well, what the heck's going on? He's got blood all over his hand. And he goes, what? And he goes into the bathroom, and he looks on his head, and here's this Y shape cut into his head, really deep. And he's so embarrassed he wouldn't go to the hospital. And so he said, why would they do this to me? Why would they do this to me? And I went, I don't know, maybe they were trying to get your attention, and they couldn't get your attention. So they gave you a sign that says, yeah, this is for real. Because he had this thing, and a lot of experiencers have this thing. They'll say, I get these dreams, but no, I don't think I'm being abducted. I don't think so. And this is what happened to him. And then later on, he has this orb experience where he's actually cured from cancer. And this is what you realize with UFOs when you look at the data, and I'll show you the data in a second. When you look at the data, 50% of all people that are experiencers who claim that they've interacted with the phenomena say they or someone in their family has been healed by the phenomena. 40% of them say they themselves can heal. And so this guy had this very dramatic thing. He caught it on camera as this blue orb comes across. He has this big, they're going to do this operation for cancer on the back of his neck. And this thing comes, and in this blue orb, and it goes into his body. And he catches the whole thing on camera. And he goes to the oncologist on the Tuesday, and they're going to do the operation. And the guy said, the whole thing's gone. His neck is, all they found was 3 little tiny non-malignant whatevers they pulled out of his neck. And he goes to the guy, the oncologist, and the oncologist said, what happened? He said, I don't know. It happened Saturday night about midnight. And he said, what do you mean? He said, it just happened. And the oncologist said, it can't just happen. So what happened? And he couldn't get it. And then his real doctor, he'd actually told him about because he'd shown him the wound, even though he hadn't got stitches. He took it to his own doctor who knew the story. And when he showed this blue orb that had come into his body, the doctor was going, play it again. And he made him keep playing this thing. So that's the signal. This is a really bizarre story. This is the story of the Allagash. This is one of these things. There's no other way you can explain this by the fact that this is all set up. So these 4 guys, they're artists. They're teenagers. They're on the Allagash River in northern Maine. They have this experience. They're out. They build this giant fire. They go out and they're paddling in the middle of the night, and they see this light. And I know because I've flashed lights at them. When you flash lights at them, they're very reactive. And so they're there, and this thing is there, and the guy takes this big flashlight, and he flashes it at the object, and all of a sudden, it just lights up, and it starts coming after them. And they're paddling as fast as they can. They're trying to paddle back to where the fire was. And when they get back, the fire's gone. The fire's just about out. And they don't really realize it. They just go to bed, and they go, that's kind of weird. The fire was out. And it was only about 5-10 minutes. So anyway, this is 1976, the year after me. Nothing happens. They don't remember anything. They don't remember anything that happened. In 1988, one of them fell through a floor building a house or whatever. He has a really bad back, and he can't sleep. They've got him in the hospital. They're trying to get him to how he can sleep or whatever. They got him all wired up, and he's all upset. And he says, "Give me something to read." And so the nurse goes to get him something, and she brings him the book Communion. Now, what's the chances? If you want to know this is a signal, if you want to know this isn't a signal, go to Amazon.com, look up Communion, and look at the comments. You'll see people saying, when I saw that book, I knew I had been abducted. It was like a cue. And Whitley Strieber said he was going to call it body pain. And his wife starts to channel in the middle of the night. And his wife is saying, we shall, in a different voice, we shall not call it body pain, we shall call it Communion, because it's a communion. And they changed the name of the book. So they bring him this book, and of course he just flips out, absolutely flips out, and he's yelling and screaming, and he sees this figure on there, and this is the wake-up. They're turning him on. They're waking him up. So he's flipped out, so they go and get a psychiatrist. They bring the psychiatrist in to talk to him and say, what's wrong? What's the deal? And he said, oh, it reminds me of these dreams I'm having. It reminds me of these dreams. And the guy happens to be an associate of John Mack from Harvard University who does alien abduction research. And it's like, what's the chances of this? And then he's a twin. And nobody wants to take the case, but there's a guy coming through town, a UFO researcher, doing abduction research, who's interested in twins the next week. And so they go, and the whole story comes out with these 4 guys telling their story. And it was 12 years between. And this whole bizarre thing about the book, that you're asleep, and then at some point they just turn you on and say, okay, it's time. And these guys, their art all changed. One guy became very mathematical. All these bizarre things in their life changed. Now here's the big one, the training. A lot of experiencers will talk about training courses. They're upset. Can you talk to them? You got to stop it. I'm in school every night. I can't take it. They're teaching me something. I don't know what they're teaching me, and I haven't got time to sleep and stuff like that. So they're doing this training thing. This is the one that interests me the most. And I've got a White House UFO YouTube channel, and I've got about 8 of these people on there. I collect these people. I have 50. 14% of all the people, the experiencers who claim to have interacted with the phenomena, say they've flown the craft. And I've got every type of person you can think of, and I'll give you 2. One is a guy, he's an F-16 jet fighter pilot from the former retired colonel from the U.S. Air Force. He didn't come to my lecture. Right after the lecture, he comes to they go for pizza or whatever. We were at a restaurant, and then he comes and they said, David, you should have been at Grant's lecture. He was talking about flying the craft. Tell him about your dream. And he said to me, oh, well, it was just a dream. I said, well, everybody says it's a dream. And so I said, tell me your story. And so he tells this story about flying the craft. And I've got 50 people, and I have never, ever had anybody say something different. How do you fly the craft? Nobody has ever said there's a steering wheel. For example, the famous musician Cat Stevens is an experiencer. He's an abductee, talks about it, wrote 2 songs. One was called Freezing Steel. I was on the ship. I was on the house of freezing steel, the house without the guiding wheel. There is no wheel on a flying saucer. So everybody tells the same story. They come on the craft. They're standing there, and there's people behind them. They don't know if they're beings or they're military or whatever. They can't see them. And then they're standing there, and they don't know what to do. And then somebody from behind them will say, go ahead and do it. And then they'll say, I don't know what to do. And then they'll say, you know what to do, just do it. And so the F-16 fighter pilot, there's a panel. Puts his hand on the panel, puts both his hands on the panel, and next thing you know, he's flying the craft. And he said it was like flying an F-16 jet fighter. And he's flying the craft, and he's just amazed. Like, what's going on? And then he takes his hand off the panel, and he keeps his other hand on the panel because he figures it's going to stall. And then he's sitting there, and he's still flying, and everybody tells the same story. You become one with the craft. The craft is alive. You become one with the craft, and whatever you think is what the craft does. So if you say, go to Mars, you're at Mars. Whatever you think is what this craft does. And it's this symbiotic relationship, the oneness, this main message that aliens are trying to put out. You become one with the craft is alive, and whatever you do. So this guy had his hand, he takes his hand off, then he takes his other hand off, but he keeps it about this far above because he figures the thing's going to stall, and he put his hands back on to keep the thing flying. And then I go to a 747 United Airlines pilot. Same story, except his is a ball. He puts his hand on the ball. He's flying through clouds. Same thing. I become one with the craft. The craft is alive. Whatever I think is what the craft does. And you can see the U.S. military is now working on this technology. They're trying to get this technology of being symbiotic with the craft, where you can just turn like this, you don't have to think, you can fire your weapons, you do it all by thought. And all crafts, from what I've seen, so there's 14% of all experiencers. Out of 4,000 experiencers, I don't know how many answered the question, but of the people who answered the question, 14% they've flown the craft. And I said to the researchers, and nobody will play the game, I said, don't you think we should study these people? This is directly telling us how to fly craft. It's got to do with consciousness. It seems to be pretty important. And they say, well, there's lots of stuff happens on crafts. And I say, well, yeah, lots of stuff may happen on crafts. When they start flying the thing, don't you think we should be following up? Especially when everybody's saying exactly the same thing. And that comes to this consciousness thing. The consciousness is the key to this whole thing, to understand what's actually going on. So 14% fly craft. 40% of all people who answered the question said at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And that is bizarre. You're not going to make that up. That's not something, if you're going to make up a story, you're going to make up that you knew everything in the universe. And I would, like even with some of them, I would say, well, how do you know on the far side of the universe they didn't tell you about number 7, 8, 9? And they would say, I had a download experience, so I know what this is like. They'll say, I don't know, I just know for sure. I just know that's what happened. And so you have these people that say they knew the answer to everything, which indicates that the phenomena has taught people to go into higher self, whatever you want to call this, everything, knowing everything. The information is all there, and it's the ability to transition, to shut down the left rational ego mind, get out of there, and you can go and get whatever you want. All the information, you can pull down whatever you want. It's all there. It's not that we have to learn it. It's all there. And the other thing is 42% of all experiencers who answer the question say they have mathematical, technical, or scientific material that's in their head that they did not learn in school. And nobody will deal with this either. And I said, don't you think I had one woman, I'll just give you one example, comes up in California, shows me her cell phone. She says, look at this. I said, oh, that's cool. I'm looking, it's like a physics paper. It's got all these mathematical equations and stuff. I'm going, it's 25 pages long, and I'm flipping through it. And I said, you wrote that? She said, yeah, I wrote that. And I said, that's pretty cool. She says, I'm a secretary. I've never taken science. And you get this stuff. These people have these bizarre, and nobody seems to want to go down that road of trying to see maybe these people have it. Maybe we can learn something about this kind of stuff. They have this stuff. And you get these bizarre, when you start talking to the experiencers, you get these things. 40%, I mentioned before, say they can heal people. 54% of all experiencers that answer the question said they were talked to about oneness and love. Those, if you get into mystical literature, this is the key to everything. Everything is love. Everything is one. Love is the answer. And this is the thing. So they're being talked to about this. 26% are talked to by the beings about reincarnation. 75% believe there's a reincarnation link to what's going on. And you got to remember, there's 4,000 experiences. This is not a couple of people. And these people have filled out questionnaire that's like 600 and some odd questions. There's a lot of questions in this thing. 75% there's reincarnations involved. 37% have had near-death experiences. And this comes to this random thing. That's 7 times the national average. So there was when this first came out, the people who got the stats, they said, we got to have a committee. We got to figure out, like, why? How is this possible? How is it possible that all these experiences have had these near-death experiences? I say, because you're making the wrong assumption. You're assuming it's one life. If it's multiple lives, it's not random. The world is not random. You chose to be an experiencer, and you chose to have a near-death experience to learn something. It's not random. If it's random world, yeah, then it doesn't make any sense. Like, how can you have this bizarre experience and this bizarre experience? And a lot of experiencers have had two near-death experiences. And you say, you got to realize it's not random, and that this reincarnation thing is playing into this. 47% have seen shadow people. The number one being that's seen, everybody talks and you hear about the grays. The number one being seen is not grays. The number one being, 55% say it's energy beings. Number 2 being is a humanoid. Number 3 is a gray. So the grays are down the list. Most people are seeing energy beings. 53% have telepathic message, including a vision. 81% of all experiencers say they've had an out-of-body experience. And that's where I say, it's all connected. It's all the same thing. You see these crossovers between all the paranormal phenomena. We're parsing it. We're saying there's near-death experiences, there's OBEs, there's this, there's that, and these guys are right and these guys are wrong. It's all the same thing. We're just coming at it from different directions. 81% have out-of-body experiences. 45% claim they were shown the spirit world. 76% have seen a ghost or a spirit. Near death I did already. 67% have had a past life memory. 47% have met and conversed with a deceased person. There'll be actually one of their deceased relatives on board the ship, and they can actually communicate with them. 29% have channeled a non-human intelligence. 83%, people always talk about, oh, it's very fearful, it's a bad thing. 83% of all experiencers, when asked the question, said they don't want it to stop. If they had a chance to stop it, they would say, don't stop it. 83% say, no, I want it to continue, don't stop it. Only 9% believe it's a bad experience. 90+% have paranormal activities. And this is what it comes down to. I have this download experience, I'm not going to get into it. I've had 2. One a little bit more dramatic a couple of years ago, where it was sort of like, how does the world work, and this sort of thing. And the number one I had, and I was watching Colin Andrews, the crop circle guy, and it had this thing that said, with absolute certainty, the answer to your question in 1975, what is it I'm looking at? Who knows what's going on? It's non-local consciousness. That was the answer. And then I gave a lecture. I started giving consciousness lecture. The UFO community sort of disowned me, like I'm kind of lost my marbles or whatever. I should be doing presidents and UFO documents and stuff like that, and what happened to Cameron and stuff. And I basically said, well, I didn't choose. I was sort of teleported there. And so I did the consciousness thing, and then I gave a consciousness lecture to the guy named Ray Hernandez, who runs the Free Foundation, the Edgar Mitchell Foundation, that gathers all this data from these experiencers. He has an encounter, his wife sees these UFOs, he goes out and he says, I wonder if I can bring one of these things in. I want to see this thing that my wife saw, with this, and this thing appears. And then he realizes there's a consciousness connection, there's a connection. So he contacts me, I said, well, I'm going to be in Florida, and I said, I will talk to you. So I give a lecture on consciousness. 2 days later, or 3 days later, he's on the Miami freeway, he's locked in traffic, and he has an out-of-body experience. They pull him out, and he sees this wheel. And on the wheel, consciousness is at the middle, and on the outside is near-death experiences, spirits and ghosts, UFOs, shamanic journeys, OBEs, mystical experiences, channeling, remote viewing. And the whole idea is it's all the same thing. Consciousness is in the middle, and there's all these different parsings. So that's what I came up with in my sort of download experience, and I have written in this book called Inspired. And then he has this experience a couple days after seeing my consciousness lecture where he gets this. They wrote a book called Beyond UFOs, and it's all on consciousness, the whole book. There's various people, Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, Apollo 14 astronaut, writes there, and they've come to the same conclusion as me, that you will never understand the UFO phenomena or any other paranormal phenomena until you understand consciousness, how consciousness works, how it's the ground of being, this sort of thing. Now we get to the world of music. I've got 22 minutes. This is going to go fast. Luckily, I pulled because of the stuff on the internet, they'll pull your thing if you use the actual songs. So I'm going to go through these quickly. The way this happened, we'll do later, and we're going to get someone to sing the song. I wrote this book called Tuned in, the Paranormal World of Creativity. The important part about this is I have no background in music. I do not listen to music. I couldn't care less about music. I've only bought two albums in my entire life, and the one I bought was a 45 called Wipeout, and that guy turned out to be an experiencer who I've interviewed numerous times, and I was like, what's the chances? And so I had no background in music, and I'll tell you how I got dragged into this thing, how they sort of hooked me into this thing. So music is very paranormal when you start to look at what's actually going on. And again, I got dragged into this. I didn't choose to do this. Yesterday, the big song, the most produced song of the 20th century, came to Paul McCartney in a dream. Woke up in the middle of the night, the song was in his head, he played on the piano, he got all the chords or whatever, and then he started to play it for people and said, have you heard this song? And they go, no, I've never heard that song. Because he was sure someone had written this song. And Let It Be, you hear the lyrics, in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me speaking words of wisdom, let it be, let it be. That was at the end of the 1960s, the Beatles had broken up, were breaking up, he had drug problems, he was divorced from his wife, it was just a terrible time for Paul McCartney. And his mother, whose name was Mary, came to him in a dream and said, Paul, it'll be okay, let it be. And that's where the song comes. In times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me speaking words of wisdom, let it be, let it be. So you start to hear these songs, you start to go through them, and you realize where these songs are coming from. And so you have these that are coming in dreams. Sting had one in dream, the biggest selling song. He was doing $2,000 a day just in playing rights for this song. And the name escapes me, but it was his biggest song of all times. He woke up from a dream. The song was in his head. He said, it took 5-10 minutes at the most to write the song. Just put it out, quickly put it down. And so the songs that come in dreams and through these download experiences are songs that are the biggest songs of all time. The story I told earlier, people were listening, I come from Winnipeg, where the Guess Who comes from. And Burton Cummings tells the story. They're in Toronto, 1968. They're playing a set, and he's behind the set. Bachman breaks a string. Bachman is replacing the string. He goes in behind. He's buying these records. He comes back. He hears Bachman starting to play. He says, I'll get those records later. I got to go. He goes running up on stage. Bachman is playing this riff, and he says, sing something. He starts singing American Woman, the biggest song ever to come out of Canada, #1 for 3 weeks in the United States. We were outselling the Beatles in Canada at that time when that song came out. So he starts singing American Woman, all this sort of stuff. And in the front row, by the set, handheld tape recorders that come out. The kid's got this handheld tape recorder. He's holding this tape recorder up. And they look at him and they realize he's going to bootleg the show. So they tell the manager, they said, get that kid's tape recorder. So they get the kid's tape recorder, they grab the tape, they play the second set or whatever, and then they go back and they say, well, let's play that tape. So they're playing the tape, and second set starts, and American Woman starts, and they're playing this, and then they went, where did that come from? Nobody remembered writing it, singing it, nothing. If it had not been for that kid with the handheld American Woman song would never have existed because they didn't write it. It's what's called a spontaneous. And in the book, the Tuned In book, I have 150 songs that were these spontaneous songs that came like that, where the person just, Carole King, first woman to sell 20 million albums. You Got a Friend, the song You Got a Friend. If you see the video where she's talking about this thing, she said, I was playing at the piano and it started to come. And she said, I went, oh my God, I hope I remember this. And it was the first woman to sell 20, and it was based on that song. 20 million albums she sold in the 1970s. So Sting had, and then I do these are the ones, you can see how many there are. These are the songs that were done in like under 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and these are some of the greatest songs of all times. And I list them. So you think you know where the songs are coming from, and then you see where these are coming from, and you get this bizarre thing. Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, this came through a channel thing where they were sitting there, and suddenly his hand started to write, and they were all watching as he wrote the lyrics about the woman who tries to buy her way into heaven. And people will say, they were into the devil, they were into this, they were into that. Well, be careful what you wish for, because a couple other songs came the same way, including the Battle Hymn of the Republic, came in the same sort of method with this automatic writing thing, and O Little Town of Bethlehem came in the same method. Bob Dylan talked about Blowing in the Wind, came in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. They asked him, where'd it come from? And he went, I don't know, from that river of creativity, I guess. He had no idea where it came from, but they will tell you. It comes like that, just suddenly. And it doesn't come to all their songs, but some of them. Well, here's the video. Let It Be, I told that story. This is a bizarre synchronicity story. Shows you how these bizarre things work. So John Lennon, this is just before John Lennon is shot. They believed they were the reincarnation of Elizabeth and Robert Browning. And they actually, on one album, they actually dress up like these two poets. And so John is in the Bahamas. Yoko is in New York. Yoko wakes up with this song in her head, and it's to do with one of, let me count the ways. It has to do with one of Elizabeth Browning's poems. And she's got all the music in her head. So she phones up John in the Bahamas. She says, John, you're not going to believe what happened. I had this song in my head today, and it's from Elizabeth Browning, and we believe we're reincarnated and all this sort of stuff. She's going through the whole thing, and she sings him the song, which is, I won't play it, it's terrible. And she plays the song, and she says, okay, you are maybe Robert Browning. Maybe you can do a song for me from Robert Browning. So John says, okay, send me all the lyrics for all the poems, because this is 1979. There's no internet or anything. Send me it. So she's going to mail all this stuff. He phones her back in the afternoon, and he says, you're never going to believe what happened. I was watching a movie this morning, and it was about a baseball player who falls in love with a girl overseas or some bizarre thing. And she sends him a poem by Robert Browning. And the poem is Ibn Ezra, Abraham Ibn Ezra. And John actually then creates a song for her. Grow old with me, the best is yet to be. When our time has come, we will be as one together. And it's the last thing that's in his journal. He gets shot shortly after that. It's the last thing that appears in his journal. And so you have this bizarre synchronicity where they have this. And there's one even more bizarre here. This girl won America's Got Talent. She said, and I checked. I knew right away. I said, it's got to be a download zone. And sure enough, she said it just came to her. 11 years old. This woman here was channeling music from Bach, Beethoven. She was getting paintings from different musicians or different artists and stuff. She does on the BBC, and I would have played you the video, except it'll kick it off any internet stuff. She's playing for the BBC. They say, write a song from Beethoven. So she's sitting there, and she's for an hour. She's saying, Beethoven says to hurry up. And she's writing away there. And then they play the song after an hour. The BBC guy, because she really can't play very much. So they play the song. It's just unbelievable. And then with the Beethoven, I'll tell you a weird story about Beethoven. Now we say we're getting it from archangels, and we're getting it from aliens, and we're getting it from whatever. In the old days, people believed they were getting it from God. And there's a story about Beethoven, that Beethoven had written this symphony, and the conductor had said to Beethoven, you know that symphony that we're going to play that you wrote? You know that left-handed violin piece that's in there? It's horrible. It is so bad, it's almost unplayable. And Beethoven said to him, I will let you know that when I got that song, I was communing with God. And do you think that when I was talking to God, I had time to worry about your puny little violin piece? So they believed it was a different thing. So it was the same thing. You're tapping into that. You're shutting down the left brain, the ego mind, meditation, whatever you're doing. You move out, you pop out, and you can pull this stuff down. That's why a lot of it happens in dreams, where the left brain is sort of shut down. So this woman was getting all these. She had 40 different classical, famous composers that she was getting all this music for. And here's Billy Ray Cyrus, Achy Breaky Heart. Here's 5 UFOs coming over thing. He put it on Twitter. He was very open about the thing. Offered a UFO TV show. Here he is. This is the interesting one. This is Bono. Bono is in England. He's at Wembley Stadium and he's playing a concert. So he's there and he can't sleep at night. And he's watching a movie called Blue Velvet. And in Blue Velvet, there's a song that was written by Roy Orbison called In Dreams. And the Roy Orbison song came to him in a dream. And it was about he's in love with a woman. And the only time he can be with her is when he's in his dreams. And when he wakes up, she's gone again. So this is what the whole thing... So he's watching this. And he can't sleep. So he's got this tape looped. And he keeps playing this thing. So this song is playing over and over again. So finally he falls asleep and he wakes up. And he's got this song in his head. And he says, this sounds like a Roy Orbison song. So he quickly tries to write this thing down. He goes back to Wembley Stadium. And he goes and he plays it for the other guys before they have the concert. And they say, that's a great song. You should get that song. You should put it down. So they're sitting there, and after the concert, Bono goes back to the room, and he's trying to record this in the dressing room after it's finished. All of a sudden, knock, 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 knock on the door. Security guy's there, and he says, "Oh, Roy Orbison is here." And he was, "Roy Orbison is here?" And he said, "Yeah, Roy Orbison came from America to watch the concert, and he'd like to talk to you." So Roy Orbison comes in, and he says to Bono, he says, "You know, you guys are fantastic, fantastic." He says, "You know, I'd like to play with you guys sometimes. Do you happen to have a song I could do?" And then Bono says, "Yeah, I kind of got one this morning." So you see these things, it's just so bizarre. Carlos Santana believed he was dealing with the Archangel Metatron. And he had Metatron had given him a message in 1998 that he was going to be put back on the market. He hadn't produced a major album since the 1960s. We're going to get all the major musicians. We're going to put you back on the airways to give this message of oneness of the world and all the sort of the mystical message. And he said as soon as that meditation, he would sit facing a wall and meditate and try to make contact. So he gets this message, and he said as soon as the message is over, a bunch of them phoned him up. I won't name. There was a bunch of major musicians phoned up, and they said, "I don't know why we're phoning. I don't know why I'm phoning you, but I just think I'm supposed to do something with you." So he puts this thing together, and they said, "We're going to put you back on the charts. You're going to have a major hit." He produces the album Supernatural in 2000, wins 8 Grammy Awards, sells 30 million albums. And this comes from this download experience where he is talking to the Archangel Metatron. Here's my friend Chris Bledsoe. Now here's where we come for, we're going to have a, Jacqueline's going to sing here. This is how I got involved in the story. This is the bizarre thing. So I'm not into music. I couldn't care less about music. I get a phone call from my friend Chris Bledsoe, and I've had a lot of bizarre experiences with this guy at his place. And so he phones me up one day. He says, "Grant," he says, "I've got a message from the Guardians. And if you've ever seen the crop circle in England where the alien is standing there with this disc, says, 'Beware of false promises and beware of gifts, false gifts and broken promises,' and this whole thing on this sort of a code message. That alien in that thing is a Guardian. That's what the Guardians look like." So he gets a message from the Guardians, and he says, I got a message for you from them. I go, "Okay." And that's what he says. "They want you to know that the message is in the music." And I said, "Well, Chris, you may be talking to the wrong guy, because I don't listen to music. I don't play anything. I don't care about music." And he said, "Well, you should listen to Kashmir by Led Zeppelin." So he says, "Listen to Kashmir by Led Zeppelin. This is the Guardian here." And there it is in the crop circle. This is the one that was painted. Chris Bledsoe painted this. It was the other thing. Once he had his experience, and a lot of experiences will say the same thing. Suddenly, "Oh, I got to paint." And they go out and they get paints, and they suddenly become painters, and they can paint. And they've never painted before in their life. So he paints the Guardian, and then here's the Guardian in the crop circle, same being. And here's the small one. And so he tells me the first one. So the first one is Led Zeppelin's Kashmir. And I say, "Whatever." Okay, I'll listen to it. But I really didn't intend to listen to it. And then the second one, so we get Jacqueline up here, and we'll sing the second one. This is the second one. And this is what you see the commercial with the aliens that throw out the beer thing. This is where I grabbed the beer bottle and went zipping up. And so he says to me, the other one you should have is After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. So if you would play it, and then I will explain how this sort of fits in. Sure. Now here's the catch. 39% of all experiencers will report being on the ship, and they're shown the screen. It's called the screen. And on the screen they have environmental devastation of a rapture type event. People always wonder, is this actually going to happen, or are they just trying to get us warned? I mentioned the school kids were getting these environmental messages in their heads. And the whole thing is, where I fell down the rabbit hole is, when he said, Neil Young had written this song, and in the lyrics you'll hear, the silver seeds, the flying saucers are coming, the loading has begun. They're picking up the chosen ones. If you've read a book called Chosen Ones by Yvonne Smith, she's one of the top UFO regressionists in the world. The experiencers are often talked about as the chosen ones. And here you have this song that has this environmental message that a lot of experiencers are running around with, that we're destroying the world. It's almost over. There's going to be a movement, and as the song says, they're going to take them to a new home in the sun, this rapture type event. That was what got me. But the part that really got me was when he said Neil Young, I said, Neil Young? Neil Young was part of this thing? And he said, yeah. I went, Neil Young grew up in Winnipeg. That's the only thing that got me. It was like, there's not much in Winnipeg except a lot of famous musicians came out of Winnipeg. If it had not been for Neil Young, I never would have touched music. But when I heard Neil Young, and then I saw the environmental message in this thing, and I suddenly realized maybe I should follow this thing, and that's when I started to go. And I realized at one point I thought that they had every single musician. It was that thing, the number who have done UFO songs or who have claimed to be abducted and this sort of thing. So that's what basically dragged me down the rabbit hole. And what happened with this song is all sorts of experiencers started to sing this song. It wasn't just Neil Young, who some people think is an experiencer, but Thom Yorke. Thom Yorke sang the song, and here's one of his songs, Subterranean Homesick Alien. The first essay I ever wrote on school was about what would it be like to be an alien from another planet. Thom Yorke was driving down a country road, hit a bird, which he thought was a pheasant. He stepped out of the car, and at that moment began to think about alien abduction. So he goes and sings the song. Here's another one of his songs. I wish that they'd swoop down a country lane late one night when I'm driving, take me on board their beautiful ship, show me the world as I'd like to see it. I'd tell my friends, but they'd never believe me. They'd think I'd finally lost it completely. I'd show them the stars and the meaning of life. They'd shut me away, but I'd be all right, all right. So he starts singing this song. And I started to look, and I found out Patti Smith, the first woman to play on Saturday Night Live. She sang the famous song called Gloria. She actually believes she's from another planet. I've got a whole listing of people like John Denver who believe they're not from around here. And it's just surprising when you see how many have this. So Patti Smith didn't believe, she believes she'd been dropped on Earth. And her songs, she sang After the Gold Rush. And she said, that's really talking about myself. From very early on in my childhood, 4 or 5 years old, I felt alien to the human race. I felt uncomfortable with thinking I was from another planet. So here's her. John Denver believed he was from another planet. He believed he was from a ring nebula in Lyra. He actually wrote a song called Spirit that was released after he died, which talks about the constellations and the stars there. Sun Ra, one of the first guys, and this is the other thing, is all the major people who started types of music. The guy who basically, one of the first guys with jazz, Sun Ra, believed he was from someplace else. Scratch Lee Perry, the guy who was producer for Bob Marley, is sort of known as the guy who created reggae music, believed he was not from around here. George Clinton, P-Funk music he started. He believed he was here on a mission. I'm pretty sure I'm an alien. Jerry Garcia, and this is a bizarre thing, Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead claimed he had been abducted. He talked about it. Main experience was a futuristic spacecraft, and for 2 days he also was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. A number of musicians, David Bowie, all these guys, they all appeared in UFO movies, and Michael Jackson said that the most proud Emmy he ever got was for reading this storybook for E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Believed that he could associate with E.T. because they were both sort of weird and they couldn't have any friends. Jerry Garcia, it was his $40,000, $50,000, $80,000 painting he sold of a UFO. Here's Jerry Garcia in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You really probably can't see it. On the far right, he's got the headset on. He's got the boom mic. That's Jerry Garcia. And they appear in all these bizarre movies. Jimi Hendrix believed that he had these experiences, believed he was from someplace else. There's a story told where he's with another guy, this Curtis Knight, who's on the album here. Curtis Knight tells the story where they get stuck in a snowstorm in New York on the freeway, and they get snowed in, and they're stuck in this big snowdrift. And he claimed that there was a light there, and this tall being came out and walked up to the car, and with his eyes, all the snow melted around the car. And then he went to Jerry Garcia's, the side of his window, and it looked like they were telepathically communicating. And this is the guy that was on his albums. And they wrote an actual book on Jerry Garcia and his UFO experiences. Ellie Goulding, 11 million albums. She's famous for lights, the story about lights. She talks about her fear of the dark, which a lot of experiencers have a fear of the dark. And she said she only has one triangle on her, and it's a triangle on her arm. And you get this thing with the triangles again. Sheryl Crow is afraid of the dark. She writes, maybe angels. I swear they're out there. I swear they're out there. I swear they're out there. Down here, I feel like a citizen of nowhere. My bags are packed in case they ever come for me. Got 100 stories and tabloid lies. Got witness to what the government denies. So I'm headed down to Roswell and wait to see what happens. Nina Hagen, a famous East German singer, actually went to, this is Yvonne Smith here on the right. She's a regressionist, alien regressionist. She went for help. This is the guy that invented dub music. They actually made a cartoon about it. He invites Travis Walton to his birthday party every year. He's an experiencer. And here's this thing where they say, did the aliens get our message? And then the other alien says, yeah, but they named it dub music and they're dancing to it. John Lennon, I mentioned that one. There's May Pang, and we're going to end with this. This is my friend Paula Harris with Uri Geller. And the Beatles were big time into UFO stuff. And here's the message, here's the encounter between Geller and John where he was given the thing. This is the last one. I was going to show you the video. This is my last slide, and then I'll end it. Ringo Starr talked about UFOs quite a few times. He actually did an album. You can actually find this on the internet. If you look up his album, Goodnight Vienna, there's actually a commercial. Him and John do a commercial for his Goodnight Vienna album. And in that commercial, Ringo Starr is standing on the street, and this flying saucer comes and lands, and the door opens up, and Ringo gets into the flying saucer, the door closes, and then you see this flying saucer over LA flying along, and it lands on top of the RCA building, and then Ringo gets out, and he's waving. He's standing on this flying saucer waving. So they had a great, and then even on Dave Scott's show the other night, we had John Tenney on, and he told a new story that I'd never heard about, about Harrison and his vision. And Harrison comes back from the dead through messages for people to create this, I think it was a song or something, to create this. So you have these bizarre elements, paranormal elements and the music elements. There's been 2 books, I've got one, and there's one book written earlier. It's really, really bizarre. And the reason I think they do it is because musicians are all very right-brained. They're not rational, analytical, they're right-brained. And the whole thing between this inspiration, the ability to get into the field and get the material and bring it back down, is the ability to shut the left brain down. And musicians are not very left-brained. They're very right-brained, very creative, and a lot of experiences happen with very right-brained people. If you look at the alien implants, Roger Lear did the alien implants in Los Angeles, and they asked him, what's common between all people who you've taken these implants out, and there were 17, what's common between them? He said 2 things. Number 1, they're all right-brain creative people, and number 2, all implants are on the left side of the body. The left side of the body is run by the right brain. So it indicates that the implants are maybe influencing the right brain. They're not interested in your rational, analytical brain. They couldn't care less. They're interested in the other side. So I'll leave it at that, and if anybody's got questions, they can talk to me later. Thanks a lot.